my job is not to win every moment, but to live with my decisions indefinitely. My recommendation was never taken lightly, and I know that at the time, considering the context, it was in the best interest of the district, and no one will ever convince me otherwise. This is debatable, but folks who really, really have tough jobs and they're breaking their back, doing construction, that's incredibly detrimental and devastates well-being. I would argue what it does to you mentally, emotionally, to me is worse if you don't take care of what's in here or what's in here, right? That's what really, really cripples a human.
You're the leader of so many educators. How do you empower them to show up fully in their roles when they're holding so many responsibilities?
Make sure you know who you are. Love who you are. If not, work on yourself before you extend yourself to lead others. And just be prepared to be responsive to others.
How do you see the role of community in education?
Our students are the reasons why we show up each and every day, but our community are the ones that can make or break a district because they can simply choose your district over mine. If I'm truly going to empower the community, who knows best? If anything, I'm the usher. I have to be prepared to relinquish some of my power because we just can't create decision-making and authority, right?
Under your leadership, Denver Public Schools has reached the highest graduation rates ever. What's your secret sauce?
One of the main reasons, Ilana, is
Dr. Marrero, so good to see you. You and I met 5 years ago in a transformational educational leadership program. I was so lucky to be randomly paired with you as your partner in crime in that program. And I remember that being already a really intense time in your career. So intense that during our one-on-ones, I would guide you through breathing practices and some mindful movement. And you were interim superintendent of New Rochelle at the time, and very soon after that, transitioned into your current role as superintendent of Denver Public Schools. And I know that you entered into that role and described it as a completely different world, one that has tested you in so many different ways. And so when you said yes, like, yes, I'm going to go be the superintendent of Denver, what did you actually expect? What did you think that was going to look like? And how has the reality of actually being in this role over the last several years shifted that initial expectation?
Yeah. Thank you for that question because it's forcing me to really relive it. What you mentioned, Ilana, and I had the same reaction. It was like one of those moments saying, no, I'm seeing all the squares. This is during like the height of COVID, by the way. And we're doing our virtual transformational work in terms of trying to develop ourselves as individuals and humans as we lead through our different industries. And I was scoping out the scene. I'm like, okay, who's this? Who's this? She seems to be an expert in this. And what are the chances? And as fate would have it,
I miss you, Dr. Marrero. But here we are. I'm so excited to have this conversation, and what a serendipitous moment it was that we were paired
it sure was. And please, Alex, although yes, I was doctor then, I was superintendent. You and I go back, Michael, you as well, if that's okay. Let be informal moving forward. But to your question, Ilana, I did not know what I was signing up for. Because this is truly a different world, no pun intended. A New Yorker, very typical in that sense. I'm very proud to say it. Although there's usually some stereotypes that come along with it. I'm typecast and even that, gesticulating on how we speak, that all comes out. I don't assimilate any longer. I am who I am, and I hope folks appreciate it. At one point in my life, I felt like I needed to. Those days are so long gone. But if you remember, it was during the height of COVID. I was in New Rochelle, and for the listeners, if you pretend as if you've never heard of New Rochelle, trust me, you have. Here's why. Because we had the very first confirmed case of COVID in the nation.
Oh, wow.
And
Whoa, what?
so we, as a city, I remember having, even before I was interim, with the superintendent, the mayor, the city controller, city manager, everyone who's who in the city and county of Westchester, but New Rochelle, and also Governor Cuomo at the time, right? That was the very first indication of how you respond and how you value, I guess, weigh and balance what's right versus what's easy and what you need to do, not only for yourself so you can live with it, but also as a public servant. And that's what I am. Yes, fancy titles aside, I have chosen this path. So I am a public servant. I'm here to serve the community that I said yes to. And ultimately, they said, yes, you're the person that can walk us or lead us through. So that was my very first test. And when all of that was happening and I was interim, yes, I was still fighting for the job that I was doing. I was doing two jobs. I was doing assistant superintendent and superintendent during the height of COVID. And we were the very first to have that patient zero. I had a couple of nudges, if you will, more of a kick in the you know what by some who have done this work and said there are little Ilanas, there's little Mikes, there's little Alexes, Alexis all over the nation. Don't limit yourself. You've proven yourself. And with that little nudge, I jumped into a search. Regrettably, I'm going to say I didn't take it really seriously because I figured, what are the chances? And 7 grueling interviews later, during the, I guess, the other side of the COVID bell curve, I'm telling my wife, "Hey, you're okay with moving to Denver?" And luckily, she said yes. But I had no idea what I was. The work, yes. The training, clearly, I was prepared for. Context was different, and I'm sure you're going to get into some of the context. It was a different way of uh, of working in educational leadership, and even really life out here versus what I was accustomed to out east.
And so when you took that position, Alex, I'll work on calling you Alex, so thank you. When you took that position at Denver Public Schools, I know the district already had a reputation as a reform hotbed with charter expansion and innovation schools and a strong philanthropic influence. And when you stepped into the role, what did you inherit? And then what did you really believe needed to change, especially for historically marginalized students?
Yeah, yeah. So, also, what also drew me to it, if I can add that, and then I'll get into some of the challenges that greeted me immediately. It was that the disparity that exists in many of the urban districts, and I would say just across the board, what some would say historically marginalized populations. I'm one, right? I'm part of that gang, right? I say underserved and under appreciated and underestimated is the best way to really describe, because little Alexi, and that's me who I'm referring to, and don't laugh, at one point a lot of hair was on this head, and that was like my defense mechanism. I used to have big old bangs and to sit in the back of the classroom. Please don't call on me. The language is not there. Maybe I would stutter. I don't like the spotlight. How I've grown, right? Beyond that. But that was a safe haven, although it was uncomfortable because of the environment that I was, I guess, forced into. And I remember school being a safe haven to a certain extent, but it was mostly me wanting to please my mom, who was incredibly ill. And she would just say, "Me trae buena nota," which means you better bring those good grades home. So I was a very good student, but fearful, reluctant reader, not what you would think someone who would aspire and ultimately become a leader in education. So, and I saw that in the data when I saw Denver. I said, wait a second, this can't be okay. And yes, you are absolutely right, Michael. We had here, this is, you said hotbed. I would say I'm going to take a more positive approach. This is one of the the showcase cities, along with like a New Orleans, Oakland, um, of educational reform. I'm putting that in air quotes because I have a different definition of reform.
What
Um,
is it? What is it?
Reform has developed into a definition that has a negative connotation, unfortunately, because of what I inherited. Right. So reform, I have a very traditional. It's has a different definition here. So does autonomy. Autonomy and flexibility and innovation are synonymous here in the context of Denver, and none of those words are synonymous with each other, right? So, and it was necessary. Let me first start by saying, at one point, I think at its lowest, 38% of scholars were graduating from Denver public schools.
38.
38, and that's all, meaning everyone. I don't have the data to see how many Black students, Latino students, and so forth, but clearly it's under 38. I would think it would be single digits, but it was dismal. So at that time, something needed to happen. Hence, here came innovation, school choice, school autonomy, what they call school reform. So you really can't knock it. Something needed to happen. So kudos to Denver for thinking outside of the box. But what I inherited after all of that, what some will call experimentation, I think that is a bit unfair. But what I had lots of school level autonomy and with good intentions, but uneven quality and widely different student experiences depending on where you landed. So I inherited a district of schools, not a school district. And that became one of my lines. I'm cheesy in that sense. I come up with little slogans so it make it stick and folks can get behind it. But that one was one of the ones that made the absolute sense. We are a district of schools. We need to become a school district. I have a whole lot of experience. I've led in a very local way. I was an autonomous principal, so who am I to say, okay, here is a top-down approach? But think about how we were functioning and where we were just simply conduits of information, conduits of finance and funds, and there was no accountability. It was all at the school level, and if the school was not successful, then it became the district's issue. Like it was kind of backwards, right? Like the free market. So our shift immediately, which obviously ruffled tremendous amount of feathers, was to become a true school district. Uh, we needed greater coherence. We needed shared expectations, consistency so that every scholar, not just some, could count on a high quality experience. The bar is here, right? We should not lower the bar because it just feels good. And there was a lot of I had a lot of wonderings in certain cases. That anchored with what you mentioned in terms of the disparate outcomes. We coined the term accelerated trajectory, centered around historically underserved, underestimated students, knowing that if we design acceleration for those students, the entire system gets stronger. And we've seen it. And it hasn't been easy, but we've seen it.
If every superintendent in the world and in this country approached education through that lens, we'd be in a completely different spot. That's so inspiring, Alex. And I just want to name that since you've been there under your leadership, Denver Public Schools has reached the highest graduation rates ever.
4 years in a row.
What's your secret sauce? What did you do? How did you transform the district from the inside out, and achieve these remarkable outcomes for your kids?
Thank you for shouting that out, because sometimes
I'm going to shout you out every single time I speak because I love you and you are doing just such remarkable work in the world.
that is absolutely necessary, because sometimes I get a lot of criticism because they say I celebrate the small wins. It's ridiculous when you think of it. Anyone who knows change management, look at John Cotter. You have to celebrate the small wins. In this case, these are massive wins. 4 consecutive years, meaning every year that me and this administration have been here, we have set a new high when it comes to students who are prepared for college, career, and beyond. That doesn't happen by mistake. But that subtle shift is one of the main reasons, Ilana. Instead of trying to guesstimate what this school, who has its own graduation requirements or expectations and how they get students prepared for competency and the finish line, there was no more wondering. So once you start to streamline that and you set the expectations and of course you offer the support, then you can actually predict. Before, and I mean with all due respect, it was more of a guessing game, and we have a very good assessment of where we're going to land now every year. So we're forecasted to go well beyond 85. And again, at one point, this is not during my tenure, again, it was 38%. And that was not too long ago. That was like a decade and a half ago, perhaps, right? So this generation has seen a significant shift. So that being a school district from a district of schools, will also honoring a certain level of site level and local autonomy if it's earned. So it's like bonded, right? If it's working for you all and also the local community, because there's a whole lot that I can also advocate in terms of school level autonomy. Remember, I was one of them. I'm serving the community, right? But if it's not working out, I have to intervene, or else we're causing more of a disservice, right? So there's a saying that sometimes you love on those kids. Because educators, we love on those kids, and sometimes we're blind to the fact that we may be perpetuating the outcomes because the love is so strong. So unfortunately, the burden lies with me saying, okay, sometimes we have to pivot. In certain cases, maybe we have to shutter some doors so we can have a better educational experience.
And Alex, something that's been a thread that has sort of been subtle so far, but I wanna pull on because I think, like you've said, this was not easy. You've ruffled some feathers. You've faced, when we were chatting before, you were just briefly before the episode, you were sharing how you actually had a time period where you were driving home and you were driving by lawn signs,
Yeah,
calling the fire Dr. Alex
Get rid
Marrero.
of him. Get rid of him. Let him go.
I have them here. Hold on, I
Yeah,
keep
oh,
Oh,
you
it.
show
still have
us.
them.
Yes.
I keep it under here. Yeah,
I
you're
love
right.
that.
Look at
Look at
it.
that.
Fired DPS Superintendent Marrero. Oh, so good. Look at that picture of you.
Several others, if I can. I keep them around, not because they're mementos. They're very.
Motivational. Wow.
This had to do with school. This had to do with school closures.
Wow.
Um, and at one point they had a big old, Michael, you'll find this funny, a big old like b- pinata of my head, right? And they started beating it down. And here is another one as well.
Wow. Wow.
Oh my God.
So, but
Yes,
here's why I keep those. Um, I'm a public servant. So clearly now the public is saying, wait a second, we do not appreciate, much less do we endorse, and shame on you, supposed leader. So as much as I'm making light of it, it does have an impact. Now, the whole fire Marrero didn't have an impact in terms of where I think that I was going to lose my job. Not at all, right? Because I have a duly elected board that I'm responsible for, and that is the needs, wants, desires of the community reflected in those 7 seats, right? So as long as they're content, then that's how it works in this democratic society, right? In this, and I believe education is a cornerstone of our democratic society, right? If we believe in the duly elected process, then that is the community represented in 7, as opposed to the hundreds of thousands who may be upset because they simply may not know or have the facts. So it's hard to get defensive when they're just responding because they've been impacted. So uh, but I also use that. Now, I keep these around because I'm actually getting prepared every other summer. I have the absolute incredible opportunity to teach aspiring superintendents who are doctoral level in Boston University. So I have to go to Boston this summer. I'm looking forward to it. I take my own time to do this. And I use this. I was able to create the course on Are you ready to be a superintendent? And I say it, driving home and seeing signs with your face plastered all over. I have young children. Um, that's the one thing that had me a little bit. I don't know if it's at the time a 7-year-old, my daughter, was going to process that her dad, her Superman, is less than that. And is that appropriate for me to have with a 7-year-old saying, hey, there's some folks who may not understand, or there's some bad people with ill intentions that exist in our society?
I think, it's amazing that your resilience just stands out so deeply in this case. And I wanted to peel back the layers a little bit on that, Alex, if you're up for it. Like, what was it? First of all, what was your inner experience like? I know you were able to turn it into motivation, but was there, what emotions were present around that? And then also, like, where did that resilience come from? And how can other educators who also face pushback in their own ways, like our listeners, like, how can we all cultivate more of that sense of resilience in the face of adversity?
Yeah, I'm minimizing it. I'm not going to say that I'm a robot and I'm immune, but it took a whole lot. And Ilana, not to mention, I could have benefited, no jokes aside, from continuation on how to become a better person and the breathing exercises. I've lost that. In my own way of processing, what I was able to get to a decision point and also embracing the fact that yes, I am a public servant, and the public in a certain case is reacting, but that is a slither of the constituents that I'm responsible for, and they do not know the facts. And even when I start to explain the facts, then privilege starts to show, right? And that's where the motivation and resilience comes from, saying, okay, this is exactly why you need someone like me here, because if not, we're going to continue to perpetuate the outcomes that we're seeing. And clearly it doesn't work, but sometimes it's the loudest, the most affluent, the most powerful, the most well connected. But yet we have the disenfranchised folks who are truly invisible in the eyes of some, who no one is asking how they feel or what they want. So once you get through all the noise and the attacks, and you're able to make that. Again, it's not me playing mind games with myself. It's just it's the same folks in the same part of town with the same type of access. When we have 90,000 students, not everybody has two guardians, parents at home. So let's just say, let's multiply that by 1.5. I surely didn't, right? So that's now a 250,000 constituents that we're responsible for, but we're hearing from the same 30, right? And when you look at the same 30, same neighborhood, same makeup, right? That that to me requires tremendous courage to say, in spite of the pressures. And some of these folks have connections in where certain outlets, they can buy ink by the barrel, right? So now it becomes a media frenzy. Staying the course because you're anchored in what's right, but also you're delivering on the masses, not the vocal minority. Going through that process is what allowed me to say, okay, not only am I going to remain resilient, I'm going to use this as motivation, and that happened relatively quickly, and it's been working tremendously, not only for me here now, for potential leaders across the nation of the future.
Well, now I know why you won National Superintendent of the Year, Alex. Absolutely incredible. I mean, the way in which you're elevating the voices that have historically been silenced, or at least very, very quiet because there's been no space, is truly remarkable. And I'm curious, you know, when we think about education, I mean, there's such a focus on like cognitive, how we think, like choice tests. How are we going to make sure that our students are performing academically? And you've done such extraordinary work to really transform the outcomes. And I'm curious, at Breathe for Change, we focus on the human side of education, right? What we refer to as human intelligence, right? It's not just cognitive thinking, but how are we developing ourselves emotionally, somatically? How are we able to effectively, whether we're educators or educators teaching our students, you know, understanding and regulating our bodies so that we can actually focus in school? As a leader, how are you like paying attention to what's happening inside so that you can actually show up for these really, really hard moments or conversations and do the right thing? And then, how are we actually helping ourselves and our students connect to our bigger purpose, right? What we refer to as universal intelligence, and create meaning in education. And I feel like there's got to be I'm hearing, but I haven't heard you talk too deeply, but I'm hearing like you're doing something different that is fundamentally working. Whether or not, yeah, I know you got people that are like saying no, 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 but the results prove it. So look at the data. What are you doing to actually help your educators and students reach these new outcomes? Like, what else are you paying attention to on a human level that is fundamentally shifting what's happening in Denver?
Great question. And I'm not going to say that I have that all figured out. I'm still developing, and there's a whole lot more that
It's a work in progress. That's a lifelong thing, Alex.
and it surely is. You may not see it, so I try to stay in shape. I want to say, for those, take my word for it. I'm rock solid under here, folks. But it's less
Yeah,
about
you are.
it's less about the physical. It's more, 'cause this is debatable, but folks who really, really have tough jobs, and they're breaking their back and doing construction, that's incredibly detrimental, and devastates well-being. I would argue, and I'm not lifting things aside from perhaps weights, but my job does not require that. But what it does to you mentally, emotionally, to me, is worse, right? Because you can heal a broken bone, you can go get some service, but if you don't take care of what's in here, or what's in here, right? In terms of, can you live with the decisions that you're making? To me, that's what really, really cripples a human, right? And I was a reluctant reader, as I mentioned, right? But I'm no longer that. Although it's hard to get through a piece because of all the interruptions, I keep books like this around, like The Call for Courage, right? Which is a lived experience of two leaders, one who's current, one who did it in very high stakes, and their analysis and how they stayed the course. Other folks' testimony. Being ruthless in my pursuit of equity, another piece. And this is not me just plugging books. They happen to be here because these are also the books that are part of the course that I mentioned. This is the books that are my anchor text.
I want to take your course
This,
for sure.
this, please go ahead, be you. This speaks to the dynamics here, right? the reform versus the union approach. Um, and I keep books like that. Another one that I don't have handy was more personal is you know uh, speaks to being okay. Oh my goodness, it escapes me. It's Japanese bestseller about courage and being disliked. Right? No, being embracing the fact of being disliked, because the people who know you appreciate you, whether they're folks who you engage with, your fellowship, or the folks that you're around. Um, they know who Alex is, right? It's not Superintendent Marrero. It's not Dr. Marrero. It's I know who Alex is, and that's always going to be there. With all the noise, it's hard to just separate it. But if you embrace it in a way to say, okay, where is it coming from? How can I become better? But also not go against my core values. And I say that not lightly because I've seen it happen, Ilana. I see how easy I've been in the rooms. And this is where I can get myself in trouble here. I've been in the rooms where sometimes it's not direct. Hey, do this and this will happen. It can be that direct. I've heard those stories, but I've been in the room and where they're quite frankly trying to see how far they can push to see if you'll break. Now, whether it's in your better judgment, whether you go on the take, right? It's a lot that happens in executive leadership. Folks may think of education, and rightfully so, as the schoolhouse. And yes, I am that. But what I am also, let me put it in context. I am arguably one of the most influential individuals, forget about educator, in the state of Colorado, and I would say west of the Mississippi. Let me put that in context. It sounds a little crazy, but
That was the best decision that Denver has ever made in their lives. In the history of Colorado, that was the best decision. I knew that because of the time that we spent together.
I agree with you. I know I shouldn't even say that, but here's why. Because I came in not compromised, not committed, not an existing relationship. I was able to draw my own conclusions, and it was anchored in the best interest of the system and the students, right? And that ruffled a lot of feathers because folks who are accustomed to the red carpet treatment, and you're not going to get that just because show me who you are, right? So I'm happy that it was me, but Denver needed that at the time. But I got two calls before I truly got on the U-Haul and started lugging all my stuff over. One from the governor, still is Governor Polis, and he said, "You had the toughest job in the state of Colorado." This is the governor who said that. And then also at the time, Mayor Michael Hancock, who said, "Oof, you have the toughest job." This is the mayor of the capital city and the governor. And what I believe they meant is this district was going through turmoil, but it's what it represents. It's very unique to like a New York, to a Chicago, and even a LA, because we're not under mayoral control. We're our own entity. It's in statute. Again, it was the poster district and city for reform, but also expansion, and they were incredibly successful to a certain extent. But the leverage that this position covers, I'm the largest employer in the state, second largest in the state, largest in Denver. I have 17,000 employees. The largest by far school district, the largest real estate owner in the entire state, because not only schools, we have a lot of fields, and I have a tremendous amount of leverage at the Capitol because our Denver legislation, if you will, not to say that they're always going to side, but if we're firm on a topic, then we sway the entire session, right? So that comes with a whole lot of power that can easily get to someone's head.
So there's a few things I'm just really grateful to you for and really struck by, Alex. A couple things. First of all, just your commitment to integrity. And I want to ask some follow-ups about this. But also, the courage that you show in your leadership to stand up to, the powers that be that could have specific interests that don't necessarily take into account the whole, and the ways that that's impacted your own journey. And I feel, our listeners are educators and leaders of all levels. And I feel like there's a microcosm of that in all of our lives, which is, whether it's, an administrator saying we need, or parents saying we need to teach to this way to these students, or not teach this way to these students. And, we hear it all the time in the hundreds of thousands of teachers we interact with, of the different pressures they face, or and how harder it is to go against the grain. So yeah, if there was like how did you find this? Like you mentioned earlier, it's you stay focused on the full constituency that you serve, and that gives you motivation and purpose. But, for those listening who want to have a little bit more Alex in their own lives, in the sense of being able to stand up to the powers that be and do what's right, what words of advice or encouragement do you have for them?
It's anchoring, if you will, in purpose and not reacting. We're all human. We have to react. I have, I pace like a madman around here because that's how I process nowadays.
You're moving your body, the energy's flowing. Sounds perfect.
I'm sitting now because hopefully this can go on because I'm having a whole lot of fun. I didn't know how long we're going to go, but I'm usually erect on my foot and walking around. My staff is remarkable, knowing very well that everyone's going to grab a seat except Dr. Marrero because I'm doing this because that's how I process. But I remind myself to the question that my job is not to win every moment, but to live with my decisions indefinitely. When I bring a recommendation before the Board of Education, it's not for anyone to debate whether it's right or wrong, because now it's for the board to decide. But my recommendation was never taken lightly. And I know that at the time, considering the context, it was in the best interest of the district, and no one will ever convince me otherwise, right? If I can look back and say that I stay true to my values, to the community that I'm serving and the students, I can withstand the discomfort of the present, right? That coupled with small and steady grounding practices, meaning I rely on simple routines, like
What are they?
like carving out some quiet time of thinking, because sometimes I'm back to back to back to back to back. I don't have any processing time. So what I'm doing now is, hold on, I have to process this, and then this mind of mine, and it goes off. But sometimes it pays tremendous dividends because I come up with some outlandish ideas. And kudos to the team here, and they put it into action. I'm saying, yep, that's kind of what I wanted, but I envisioned it somehow, right? So, and so checking my instincts with trusted colleagues who tell me with truth, hey, you don't want to go down that road. That sounds untenable. And then a little bit of pushing, then we have something remarkable.
I have a question on what you just said. In those moments of quiet where you actually give yourself space to pause and be like, what's here for me now? And something shows up and you got this outlandish idea, and then there's your district implementing this vision that you have. What's been one or two of the most impactful decisions you've made in quiet that has had a significant positive out on your district?
I have one. Thank you for that.
Yay.
Because it's going to seem so, it's not novel in a sense. And I remember sitting and we were getting data presentations and where schools are and aren't. And it was pretty gloomy, right? And the educators in the room probably thinking, hey, we need to do this better. Curriculum leads to great instruction, pedagogy, and just what a teacher would do, right? And then I started thinking of little Alexi and my journey when I was, again, trying to hide from being called on, to then going to middle school in a different part of the Bronx, Riverdale, and having colleagues now, peers, I should say, students who were experiencing something that was so beyond the norm that we would just see when we would watch TV, like Saved by the Bell, right? Like this really happens that you and your parents, both of them, are engaging in retreats. You went to Europe. You did what now? You went skiing? Like that really happens? You read as a unit, a family unit, your own book, their own book, and this family reading time, this family dinner time. That wasn't the case for me. Now, don't feel bad for me because my upbringing made me who I am, but circumstances made it impossible for the Marrero household, as broken as it was, but not just me, the Rosarios, the Gutierrezes, everyone around the block had the same. So in my world, that was normal. And I realized that there's a different world outside of that. Why I say that is because the disparity that exists is less of what we do not do during bell to bell in schools. It's beyond that. When I went back after taking a couple of trains and buses to get home, that in itself will be something that would never happen to some students, right? They're either getting dropped off or perhaps they're walking around the block. Not for me and mine. And then when I get home, it's sometimes a survival mode. How can we not get in trouble in the streets of the Bronx? So if I can shift that, which is not what I'm responsible for the school day and perhaps the nexus to and from. But that's what hit me. This is the crazy idea. Saying, you know what, we need to create community hubs where we can possibly offer books, we can offer an opportunity for a parent to not only engage in a food bank, a true bodega experience. Like, what do you want to eat? You want pasta? Here's how you make the linguine. Here's how it's healthy. Turn it into a learning experience for you and your child, mom. Right? If you can't pay your bills, which is something I often experience, how embarrassing. Now we have to go sell Avon in the streets of Fordham Road and deal with the ridicule. Um, you know what? Bring me the bill and we'll pay for it, mom. Right? What I was trying to accomplish there was to eradicate the disparity that exists outside of the school day. So I can try to create some parity outside of the school day so now folks can have the better experience, not only the adults, but ultimately the students. So I came up with this and folks thought I was crazy. But kudos to my team. The ones who didn't, they're saying, you know what? Great idea. Are you going to allocate money? Yes. Here it comes. I've neglected to mention I have $1.5 billion as a budget. So that means that I can put some things into motion. And those community hubs have expanded into a true lifeline for our communities who have been underserved, and in particular for the 4,000 plus new arrivals that we've welcomed in the last couple of years. No exaggeration, Ilana. Without that, they would have never made it. They would have left or worse, meaning that they would have been overcome with the realities of life, from famine and food insecurity at all. So that idea, from my lived experience, saying, okay, let's try to do something that's outside of the bounds of what we're responsible for. But ultimately, we're going to see the benefits not only in our outcomes, but truly just we're doing right, right? Um, Expanded into something well beyond what I was even articulating in that meeting where I was just spewing.
How does it
So
feel to sit in, just the impact that you've created as a result? I mean, I'm moved to tears right now, and I wanna know what it feels like to be you. Like, what does it feel like to stand deeply for love and for community and for everybody, and to know that it wasn't easy? It took so much courage to go against, like what Michael said, the grain, but you did it, and here we are having this conversation about it. Like, how does it feel for you?
it feels remarkable. And back to where the community hubs, if I can, to just give you an example of how sometimes you just need to take it in. Because what's also not healthy is that, okay, we did that terrific and not bask in the celebration and go on to the next thing. I suffer from that, Alana.
Me too.
This past summer, where we had 66 GED graduates, Spanish speaking moms, all of which were new to the country, mostly from Venezuela because of the influx of what we received as a sanctuary city. And where now, because the offerings on the hubs expanded tremendously, right? Now we're doing like parent academies, and these parents who saw, no exaggeration, death, rape, persecution in their trek from South America, barely getting through Central, almost never getting through Mexico to create a safe haven here in Denver. That in itself is a victory. But now they had opportunity to showcase their scholarly aptitude, and ultimately we hired a good amount of them. Right? It was like full circle, and then the speeches from some of these moms just put it all in perspective. And I needed that at the time because I tend, just like you, go, 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 go. And I said, you know what? Maybe a tear won't come out of my face, but right now, just know in this strong exterior, I'm feeling it, and I'm so proud of you all. But wow, if I had anything to do with it, in certain cases, some will say that I was the architect. It feels remarkable.
That's really, really moving, Alex. And we all show that emotion differently, and we all celebrate in our own way. I do think it's something that, as educators, with how much is always on our plates, leaders and educators, it's hard to give ourselves that space. But it does something, in my experience too. It does something special for the soul, and gives us that energy for the next thing when we do really take in that impact. And I love that you brought up community hubs as this thing, because for us at Breathe for Change, community is core to everything we do. And there's alarming statistics around isolation, educators, students, and everyone in our country feeling isolation at record highs and the mental health issues that come with it. You mentioned community. How do you see the role of community in education, and how do you, if directly outside of these community hubs, how do you really invest in that? Because I do think it's something that so many educators who are listening to this are wanting more of, and I think it can be a real inspiration to hear leaders such as yourself how you think about that.
I have a couple of golden nuggets and golden rules. Decision making, if you simplify it, obviously is much harder when you're in the seat. But if you base your decisions in the best interest of students, you really can't make a bad decision. And if you embrace being a public servant, which clearly you all see that I have, then you understand that it's not about you. It's about how you, in turn, show the community, empower the community. So, as a lifelong educator, systems leader, I embrace the weight of the moment and the responsibility to champion communities moving forward. I actually have it. Let me plug my own book. I've plugged so many books. I should plug my own. Look, right. So when it comes to empower families, I have this strong belief that there's a lot of tokenism that goes along with how community is engaged. And you can say that I say engagement is just that I'm asking you. It could be one way. I say respond to this survey, right? Involvement to me is probably the next tier where okay, now we're probably rolling up our sleeves a little bit more, where we should strive. And seldomly do you see this in any industry. And unfortunately, you don't see it in education, where I think is where you should see it first, is the last tier, the ideal state, which is again going from engagement to involvement to ultimately empowerment. Right. And what empowerment means to me, and yes, I have a whole lot of power. I know that sounds it doesn't go to my head, but I know that it exists. Right. And if I'm truly going to empower the community, who knows best? If anything, I'm the usher. I have to be prepared to relinquish some of my power because we just can't create right decision making and authority. Right. If I have it, I have to be prepared to share it. So what I do, I listen deeply to our community's open dialogue that honors the lived experience of those. Because what I experienced in New York, it's not cookie cutter. Right. I just can't say, okay, here's how I was able to persevere. I built shared ownership by shifting from involvement to engagement to true empowerment of students, of families, educators, and partners to shape the priorities on our path forward. I have this Office of Student and Family Empowerment, which is one of my initiatives. And hopefully, folks across the nation embrace it. And yes, we have FACE programs, family and community engagement. We have one. And that's the group that expanded my community hubs. They're remarkable. But sometimes it just hits to that level of perhaps involvement or engagement. If even if we never get to empowerment, the fact that we're trying to me, is the work that we all need to be engaged in, right? And it's exciting. We're building it now, and I know that it's going to work not only in terms of student outcomes, which ultimately is what we're responsible for, but just in the land of choice, which is here in Colorado. That means for the listeners, this is not the case in New York, no matter what school you're interested in, whether you want to go to Aspen and you live in Denver proper, if you can get the child there, then you are allowed to. Our students are the reasons why we show up each and every day, but our community are the ones that can make or break a district because they can simply choose your district over mine. And then now what happens? I don't have students, meaning I don't have funding. And now I have to do what I never want to do again. Unfortunately, I've had to lead through, which is school consolidation and closures, because you can never win there. You can never convince truly, and this sounds like I'm patronizing, and that's not my intent, but the lived experience, the legacy from ancestors who went to a certain school, I can make a very clear point financially on why this is untenable. I can also speak to the educational experience. But when that love and appreciation is there, no one's going to want to hear your rationale. And that is not easy to do. But empowering the community, my ideal state, if they feel that, you know what, Doc, this is painful, but it's best for us, perhaps we should consolidate these schools and then in turn this into another community hub. That will be incredible. I believe one day that'll happen.
Alex, you talked a lot about empowering families and empowering communities, and I just absolutely love that perspective. And I'm curious, like, you serve so many educators, right? You're the leader of so many educators. How do you empower them to show up fully in their roles when they're holding so many responsibilities and they're faced with so many challenges on a day-to-day basis in their classrooms? How do you empower them? And then how have you seen that impact how students are empowered themselves?
The message that we've kind of been discussing all along, you have to stay true to yourself. Know who you are, embrace who you are. If you feel that now the individual that you are needs some work, then work on that. Work on yourself first, and just be prepared to be responsive to others. If you're not content with who you are, and I'm imperfect like we all are, um, but I'm not someone who's going to get compromised. I'm not someone who's going to succumb to the pressure. I'm not perfect by all means, but I'm anchored in those, what I call those, the creed of best interest of students. And how can I make sure that I'm truly embracing the community and being responsive to them, ultimately trying to empower them? It's kind of like a cheat code, Ilana, right? But if I was dealing with something, whether it was mentally health related, that I'm in no position to take on that because I'm simplifying it, because sometimes you have to simplify it, but it's incredibly hard. It's no different than at least in my context when I'm yelling at the TV saying, "Why would you throw that pitch?" or "Oh my goodness, why would you pass? You should have run." It's very easy when you're a sidearm quarterback on Monday morning, right? But you have no idea unless you've been on the gridiron when folks who are twice your size want to take your head off, right? You have no idea until you're in the seat, right? So let's not make assumptions. That's why it's easy. It's hard to hear, but then I quickly move beyond it because you have no idea because you haven't been in my seat, right? It took a long time for me to get there. Now, content with who I am as an individual. I would say to those listeners, make sure you know who you are, love who you are. If not, work on yourself before you extend yourself to lead others.
You're reminding me of my 4-year-old superstar, I called him, in my pre-K class, who once said, in a community, first you have to love yourself, because if you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. Patrick, wise little young man.
Shout out to
And
Patrick.
right, really gets at the essence of what you shared.
And I feel like it's such a perfect place for us to, I know we're coming up on the end here. I feel like it's such a beautiful message to close on, just because, you know, all of our listeners are listening to this generally because they are working on themselves, because they are educators and leaders who want to do that inner work first so that then they can show for their communities, just as you do, Alex, and just as you just left that with. So I feel like, what a powerful way to close such a beautiful conversation. And it's such an inspiration to see the way that you do that. I'm definitely going to be carrying forward that inner Alex in me too when I'm faced with challenges, to just stay in alignment with my values and not be compromised.
Me too. And I just cannot wait for our one-on-ones where we can get back to the breath, connect, and, share our passions together. This has been such an inspiring and transformative conversation for me. So thank you so much for showing up and in the midst of everything that you hold, for taking the time to share who you are and what you're doing with all of us and our educators.
No, this has been an absolute treat, and we got into a lot of our limited past, Ilana, and a little bit of the transition. We didn't touch on some of the very in your face things that we're dealing with now, perhaps in the future, because we've been tested. I've been tested in ways that, going to battle back then with a governor in New York is nothing compared to going to battle with the federal government, as we've been doing the last year here. So perhaps in the future.
Can't wait to bring you back on the show, and we will get into all of that then.
That'll be awesome.